Hi guys, welcome to our next little interview that we're doing in this series. Tonight I'm interviewing Bindi, who is one of the AGECS Reconciliation Ambassadors. So hi Bindi, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Hi. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Bindi.
My name is Bindi James. I'm a Yorta woman from Kamargunja. Traditional lands are up just over the border of New South Wales and come all the way down to Shepparton, Maribna area and spread out across near Wangaratta, Echuca. And I live in Melbourne. I've lived here all my life, but worked a lot in the Aboriginal community in Victoria, and I'm currently a public servant.
Cool. And you've had experience in early childhood as well?
I have. I spent a lot of time at Yappera Children's Services as a childcare worker. I got my qualifications while working there, and then I became the administrator of the service.
Cool, thank you. Hey Bindi, what does Australia Day mean to you?
To me, it's a day of mourning, like a lot of our mob. It's a sad day. And I know that, a lot of the non-Aboriginal Australians look to celebrate, and a lot of them do. A lot of them are our allies now who, wish to take that day of mourning with us. I work with a lot of non-Aboriginal people and often get asked, why don't I celebrate Australia? We're all trying to move towards reconciliation, but in a way that they can understand. I often ask them, do they expect the people or the victims of the Holocaust to celebrate, a particular day, or the day or the timing of the Holocaust? So, yeah, it's a sad day.
So why is the 26th of January so hard for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
Because it's re-traumatising us by asking us to celebrate a day that, many of our families were broken down, murdered, raped, stolen. It's just a difficult day in general, and to continuously want to celebrate a day that's traumatising for us is painful.
So organisations and councils that have, changed the date, how do you feel about that?
I would love the date to be changed, because I do want to get to a point where we all can celebrate a day and, try and work together and move forward so that we are that step closer to reconciliation. I'd love to be, a united party.
Yeah. What are ways in which early childhood educators could educate staff and kids about the true histories of First Nations people?
By firstly talking to First Nations people and getting educated and finding out what it does mean to us and why it's so difficult, so that then with their understanding, they can pass that on to our next generation who, taught properly from the early age. I think we'll have a better Australia in the future. Because, when we were in school, we weren't taught what was right. And, half the time we were popping up our hands and saying, hey, that's not what our parents are telling us.
Mm. Do you think it's hard for non-Indigenous people to grasp the true histories?
I think for some, and I think for some, it's what they're taught in their home as well. If their parents have a particular opinion on what the history is, and you're taught that at home, you're never going to believe anything else because it's what you've been taught, unless you've gone out there and lived it, or, you've connected with a community and actually found out the truth for yourself. It's not going to change.
Yeah. So what does reconciliation mean to you, Bindi?
It means that all of Australia come together and we can, move together forward without the racism that's out there at the moment, without the misunderstanding and judgments and preconceptions of what Aboriginal people are and what we mean.
Yeah. What's your dream for reconciliation in the future?
To just be one, to honestly move together, be able to be happy in the country that we all reside in and we're going to share together for hopefully a long time. On my travels, I've been to other countries where they're just so patriotic and, regardless of the color of their skin, they're just united. And I would love to see that we get to that sort of a point.
Do you think we would?
I don't see it in my lifetime.
Do you think in your kids' lifetime?
I would like to be hopeful, but you know, that's probably just 20, 30 years after me. And we make progress and then all of a sudden we go back, you know, 10, 20 years. So I don't know. I hope so, but I'm not hopeful.
What activities can early childhood educators do to talk about reconciliation for young kids in the classroom?
Activity specific, I can't name them, but a lot of work about, you know, just no hate, no judgment. Doesn't matter what color you are, what shape you are, whether you're rich, you're poor, we're all the same at the end of the day, you know. As long as we're happy or the kids are happy and without judgment, I think that's the start.
So Bindi, where are some places that early childhood educators could go to start learning about the true history and contemporary issues?
I think there are definitely a lot of organisations within the Victorian Aboriginal community. Early childhood educators, you know, could reach out to some of our elders who are doing consultancy work and, you know, maybe have them come in and have a chat to them and their team. There's definitely TV programs out there. There's also a lot of our mob on social media with, you know, a lot of Aboriginal businesses. A lot of them are doing work within the early childhood education space. So, yeah, I think that they're a good start at least. You know, we have our own newspaper, we have NITV, our own network. There's definitely a lot of places that they can go to online as well if they can't get out there.
Being Aboriginal, we don't know everything about Aboriginal issues, and I'd be surprised if you do as well.
I would never claim that, no, not at all.
Where do you learn about culture?
I'm very lucky. My mum, she's since entered the dream time. She was a great teacher and just a great storyteller. And, you know, even when we didn't want to listen, she was talking and telling us about our history, our family. So I've got a lot of knowledge, but since her passing, if there's something I need to know, I go home to country and talk to some of the elders up there, a lot of my uncles, and, you know, they'll take me out on country and start teaching me the things that I don't know, but I want to know. But, you know, just even every day in our community, we're always learning from each other. So, yeah, definitely our elders.
Do you think it's hard for Aboriginal young people to know all about their Aboriginality?
Definitely. Sometimes I think with the social media, it's disconnected the community a little bit. You know, when I was growing up, just going into Fitzroy, going into some of the orgs in there was always elders around and other community members. It's not the same as it used to be. And with COVID, it's made it even more difficult. You know, you just can't go in there, sit down, have a yarn and a cuppa. Yeah, definitely difficult for them.
What are two things that every educator should know about working with First Nations families?
Definitely a lot of our cultural practices, you know, or familiarise themselves with that. Good start's always some cultural training. And just the way that, you know, we're not just, when you're dealing with just the mother or the child or the father or the child, you're not just dealing with them. There's usually a whole community behind them. And it's not uncommon for other families to want to be part of what's going on with the child whilst they're at childcare.
Yeah. Do you think that early childhood educators are getting it right so far?
I think a lot of them are really making a lot of progress, and maybe it's because, you know, we've got a lot of upcoming generation and they're on social media and they're socially conscious, so they're definitely in heading in the right direction by wanting to, you know, incorporate our culture into their learnings.
Yeah. What would be one of the issues that early childhood educators might have in trying to embed cultural perspectives into the curriculum?
Some of the cultural issues are going to be, where do you draw that line and not crossing over from what's appropriate to inappropriate? You know, not stepping that boundary. Like, so there's things that they're going to want to teach them and think that it's okay, but it'd be like, hey, that's our responsibility. So just knowing those cultural laws as well, you know, which can be difficult. I mean, I even know some of our mob who are married to non-Aboriginal people, and they go on to have Aboriginal children, and there's still, even for them as a parent, there's cultural law boundaries that they just can't cross. At the end of the day, it's our responsibility. So therefore, it's also our responsibility to educate the educators.
So Bindi, what do you think are some of the barriers that early childhood educators might have in teaching Aboriginal kids that are in the classroom?
Definitely cultural law and protocols. You know, there's things that they're just not going to be able to teach them. And also there's probably some apprehension from the parents of a non-Aboriginal person teaching our mob.
Yeah.
Basically, they're it.
Yeah. Do you think that, what have been some bad practices that you might have heard of that early childhood educators have done?
You're wanting to open that can of worms.
Yeah.
Definitely, you know, educators going out there and teaching our children things that they've heard or been taught, and not verifying the information that they're passing on. And, you know, kudos to the ones who are trying, but you need to verify the information that you're passing on, because we need to remember these children are going to grow up and think, hey, this is what I was taught, and yet it's not actually the truth. So, you know, we do want that right history being put out there.
Do you think that some educators are getting it right, or do you think the majority are still struggling?
No, I'm sure there's a lot of them out there getting it right, because, you know, if they're doing the right thing and researching the information that they have from Aboriginal people, and the information is authentic, then, you know, kudos to them for trying, and hopefully they're doing it right. They're being respectful in any information that they're passing on, and they have the approval to pass it on. Mostly, you know, just because you see it online, it doesn't mean that it's yours to take and run with. And you do have to, you know, speak to those elders and get that permission to do it.
Yeah. What barriers do you think that some educators might have when they try to consult with community?
I think from the community, there'll be a lot of apprehension as to, or, you know, mistrust in non-Aboriginal people because of our history and meetings with governments and, you know, other non-Aboriginal people. They're not going to initially trust this person. So they do need to build up their rapport and put faith back in the elders as to what they're doing with the information, how they intend on using it, and how they'll do it. It needs to be respectful. But so definitely the barrier at the beginning is going to be the mistrust, but they need to do the legwork in building that rapport with our mob.
Yeah. I've heard some organisations go, oh, let's name all our rooms in a local language. What would be the process they should be going through to do that before they just start putting labels up on the rooms?
Yeah, well, for example, if it was Yorta country, I would expect them to first speak to the Yorta Nation organisation, maybe have some consultation with some of the elders, you know, not just go ahead and talk to one Yorta person and think, hey, I've got permission. That's not how it works. Even me as a Yorta person, if I want to do something that includes language, I'm not going to talk to one or two people. I'm going to talk to a few, in particular my elders. But, you know, definitely reach out to whatever country you're on, that organisation that, you know, that like Yorta nation, reach out to that nation and seek that permission.
Hey, Bindi, growing up while you're at school, like in primary school and secondary school, how much Aboriginal history did you kind of learn?
I didn't really learn any. The only time Aboriginal people were mentioned was when Captain Cook arrived in Australia. That was basically it. So the lesson normally ended with me going, hey, it's not what happened.
Yeah.
And then getting booted out of the class.
Yeah. Well, just to put for some people, what, or without disclosing your whole age, what first, sometimes what century was that in? Because some people something that was years and years ago. But what, we're talking about the 80s here or the 90s?
Talking about the early 80s, I don't mind saying I was born in 74. So by the time I went to school, it was 1980. So not long ago.
Do you think people are shocked to hear that?
I think they, I don't know, you know, when I talk about the stolen gen and say, hey, you know, it's still happening in the 70s, people are like, no. So I don't, they might be shocked. Yeah, they might.
Yeah. Where did, in any part of your education, where did Aboriginal issues start to appear?
In school?
Yeah. Or do you go to uni?
I did.
Yeah. What did you study?
Early childhood.
Was there any Indigenous perspectives in that course?
Luckily for me, the first year of it was an Aboriginal childcare course. So yes. Second year, no. Not really.
No. Has that changed a lot? Do you know?
I don't know, actually. I've not had that conversation with any up and coming childcare workers.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I do know that there is a unit called Promote Cultural Safety, but because it's a training package per se, there's no curriculum that goes with it. So it's only as good as the person who's actually delivering it.
Get ya.
In what content the students are actually taught or explained.
That's sad.
Yeah. And I think the saddest part too, it's not always taught by an Aboriginal person. It's very rarely taught by an Aboriginal person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're on your own journey growing up. You always knew that you're Aboriginal, but how connected have you been to culture and your Aboriginality?
Very connected. I grew up in the Melbourne Aboriginal community. My mum always worked, well, when I went to school, mum went out to work. Before that, she was a stay-at-home mum. So, and she always worked within the Victorian Aboriginal community. So, you know, during the week she was at work, weekends, there was always community events when we were growing up. So we were always at, you know, a day out with the community on the weekends, and even, you know, back then they used to have things throughout the night. A lot of the weekends we would travel home to Yorta country for the weekend. So very connected. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. You're always still learning though, aren't you, about culture? Always.
And I'm happy to stand corrected on a lot of the issues, which, you know, the elders don't mind pulling you up now and again.
Yeah, because I think what people sometimes forget, that we do come from very diverse parts of the country.
Yeah.
And we're not an expert on everything Aboriginal.
Not at all.
But do you find that some people think might be, like an information bureau of Aboriginality?
Definitely. Like, people just assume you're Aboriginal, you've grown up and you know everything. But what they need to realise, a lot of our history was stolen from us. You know, during invasion, we were told we couldn't speak language anymore. That was gone. And you know, a lot of these mob now just expect that we speak fluently when we're home, but they don't realise the atrocities that happened years ago have impacted us even today. We don't have a lot of our culture or traditional practices. A lot of the language is gone. So yeah, we don't know everything, and we're going to continue to learn until the day we die.
Do you think people are challenged by the true history?
Definitely. Truth telling is difficult. A lot of the time people don't want to hear the truth. And whether that's because of their own belief or, you know, you would have heard this comment, just move on, forget about it. And that's the attitude of them. But, you know, they're not still living the transgenerational trauma from a lot of those impacts.
Yeah. Do you have any First Nations idols that you look up to?
I come from a really strong family of leaders. My grandfather was a minister, a teacher. His brother-in-law was Uncle William Cooper. My grandfather, Shadrach Livingstone James. His father was a Mauritian man, but taught a lot of our mob from Cumra. So, you know, my grandfather, Shadrach, Uncle William Cooper, my mum, she's my biggest idol.
And your mum was just recently inducted into, I was going to say the Hall of Fame. It's the Victorian...
The Victorian Aboriginal Honour Roll. And also she was inducted to the Victorian Women's Honour Roll.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she's doing good this year, the old girl. She'd be very proud if she was here.
If I asked you to summarise her in a couple of minutes, how would you describe your mum?
Oh, you'll make me emotional. Firstly, today's actually her memorial.
Oh.
So she's been gone 6 years today, but well, definitely staunch. She took no crap from nobody. She was a very strict woman, but that I wouldn't change a bit of it. But she just had a heart of gold. An example was, you know, she worked for VACCA on and off over the span of 25 years, both paid and voluntary. Her days were just grueling work. You know, back then in the 80s, a lot of the stolen mob were making their way home. The stories were really difficult. Resources were so minimal that a day for her at work could entail going to Warrnambool and back in one day after spending the whole day in court there, and half the time coming home with a tribe in tow, because the only option at that day in court was for these children to go with non-Aboriginal family, and she just wasn't going to let that happen. So throughout her lifetime at VACCA, it's estimated that within our own home, she cared for about 200 children. So I think that's just indicative of the type of person that she was. And, you know, she was a single parent of 6, so we weren't doing well financially. Times were tough, but it just didn't matter how tough it was at home. She wasn't going to let these kids go elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, in a way, her being honoured is a tribute to the woman that she definitely was.
Definitely.
Yeah. And at least your kids can see that, and your grandkids can see that.
Definitely.
Future.
Yeah. It's beautiful for the grandkids to see, because I mean, she got to meet them all, but she wasn't here on earth long enough to see them grow into adults, but for them to grow into adults and see that the type of work and impact that she had made.
Yeah. And I know I've spoken to you offline before about knowing your mum.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, I met your mum when she was working at VACCA when I first came to Melbourne, and how welcoming and caring she was for someone that was quite lost in culture and trying to work out my family issues, how she took me kind of under an arm, and she gave the advice that never let anybody tell you can't do something or you can't be something.
Yeah.
And wasn't scared a couple of times to clip me on the back of the head and go, boy, that's not what you do.
Oh, so you feel my pain.
yeah, I kind of know what you live with. But I only copped it a few times. So yeah, I just want to just put in here that, you know, my mum was a really remarkable, beautiful.
Well, that's very sweet, very sweet. Honestly, my sister and I, we still get phone calls today from people who came in contact with mum at VACCA and, you know, just trying to piece parts of their life puzzle back together, and all of their stories are just like yours. But yeah, she was a no mess woman. If you mucked up, she was going to tell you. But I'm so thankful for that, and I know how lucky I am to have a mum like her.
I'm going to ask you on camera, and would you mind on our resources me having a link to some articles about your mum, so people?
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah.
Cool. The last little question I've got in this little section is, what tips and strategies would you offer early childhood educators who have no idea where to start their own journey on understanding Aboriginal history?
Definitely reach out to some organisations on the country where you're living or working, or both. I think that's a good start. I think that is the start of a healthy and respectful relationship. And from there, other relationships will blossom. And I think then we would have an amazing educator on our hands.
Bindi, have you had any experience working on a reconciliation action plan?
I actually haven't had any experience on working on an action plan. AGECS is my first one.
Okay. What made you want to join the AGECS Reconciliation Committee?
I want to be involved, and I want the action plan to be in consultation with our mob and have the right outcome for our future generations, because I'm very passionate about early childhood education, and yeah, I want that education to start on the right note.
What things do you think work really well for people doing reconciliation action plans?
Definitely education, consultation with Aboriginal communities and people, and like I said, the right information getting out there and the right type of education from our perspective.
Yeah. What things don't work very well?
No consultation and no Aboriginal people on the action plan committee.
And I know we're laughing a little bit, but I think you would have heard, like me, how many organisations try to do it with no consultation whatsoever?
Definitely, and I think that's why we're laughing, because we hear this story again and again, and then we have the non-Aboriginal people trying to educate people on Aboriginal issues without consultation. It's disrespectful, and half the time the story is wrong.
Yeah. So why is having an action plan really important for early childhood services?
I think it's almost like curriculum for them, as to, you know, a benchmark that they need to attain. And throughout the year or the period of the action plan, at least, you know, look back, be able to gauge where they're at and where they are and what work needs to be done to reach that benchmark.
Yeah. Do you think that early childhood services are starting to get it right?
Slowly. There's a lot of work to be done, and these action plans are a start. So, well, it's a work in progress. Like you and I said, as Aboriginal people, we're still learning. So for these centres, it's definitely going to be an ongoing learning. It's not going to be one action plan and that's it. Definitely a lifelong commitment.
So Bindi, for the viewers that have been watching tonight, what is one thing you want them to walk away with?
My message to anyone watching would be regardless of what your plan is in regards to Aboriginal culture, definitely do the right thing and reach out to our community orgs, our elders, people like us, just so that any learnings that you're going to pass on to any child, regardless of their race or religion, that it's the right information.
Cool. Hey, Bindi, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I do want to add that, you know, I'm sure your mum's so proud of the woman you.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to have a salad soon.
So, you know, thank you very much. And thank you for being part of the AGECS wrap as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.